scary.
How are you guys? It's High Tension Day here at the old factory where we make this podcast. And I don't know what I mean by that. Abe, help me out. People need to hear your voice and know how it sounds.
I'm sorry. I just keep thinking of the podcast factory.
The pod fact.
What?
Here at Frame Rate, we're talking about High Tension, a great French film in its native parlance, Haute Tension, which I've actually seen several times. Abe, I think you introduced me to the movie.
Yeah.
Is that true in college?
Yeah, it came out in 2003, so like right when we hit college.
Very scary year. If you read 2003 from the end backwards, it spells boo with a 2 after it. But I digress. The point is, I thought it was terrifying then. I've watched it several times since. I watched it again 2 nights ago in French, and I was still scared even though it was in French.
It's a pretty gory movie. It's got what I liked about it, or the reason I remember showing it to you, is I remember when I watched it the first time, I was like, man, this director Rolodexes literally every like horror trope I can think of in a single movie, to the point that it's almost like reductive.
Okay, so that's the big contention today. Abe watched the movie again, of course, because we were going to record this for you fine folks, and somehow some of the shine has come off it. Yeah. And I had that experience recently with LA Confidential, which I used to like sometimes say was my favorite movie, but then I realized I hadn't watched it in 12 years, and I watched it and I was like, it's good, but somehow the shine had gone off. High Tension still nailed me. What is different about it for you now?
I guess, well, let me get into why I thought it was a great movie.
Please do.
I mean, it's not just when I originally watched it, and for a long time I kind of like remembered it. There's first off a spoiler, just if you know. Because it's kind of key to like kind of work backward.
Spoiler warning, I think blankets this whole podcast.
Yeah, but I just right here in this sentence, I'm gonna just do a log line. Essentially, these 2 French women are out in the country, like having a quote unquote study retreat, and they're staying with the family of one of them, Alex, and Marie's the friend, and they both kind of don't want to be there, but before everything happens on the first night, a killer comes and kills the entire family, and then the rest of Act 2 and Act 3 essentially is Marie
trying to save Alex
from this murder, until it's revealed in Act 3 that it's actually Marie has broken down into psychosis, and she is the killer and has been creating all this vicious, brutal acts, and Alex is terrified of her, and finally she essentially is put into a psychiatric ward.
It's so simple and good. I just think it's all in the execution, man. Yeah, it's one of the basic horror twists. There's a great Stephen King short story that's just a guy is walking to a date, and he has flowers and a present for his girlfriend, and you're in his head because he's the protagonist, and the whole way there he keeps hearing increasingly frighteningly like news over the radio and TV and from snippets of conversation that there's this hammer killer who's been killing people in the town, and it gets increasingly frightening, and you're like, I see where this is going. He's gonna encounter the hammer killer, and then he arrives at his date, and the present is a hammer, and he kills her with the hammer, and he throws the flowers on her body and leaves. Right. And you're like, oh, he was the monster. It's just the same twist, but it's a good twist. If it's well done, it's well done. And I thought in this, it's really well done because there's so few elements and it's so simple that you really can look back and be like, oh, everything was, I don't know. It got me, man. That's
why I liked it, because it like pulled from like a lot of films. Like it just pulls from everything American. In a lot of ways, it's the French New Wave, meaning like it's a French film that is just regurgitating kind of hermetically what the art form of like typical horror movies of the Americas is,
which now we're doing with all of our franchises.
Sure. Yeah. And so what I liked about it is that it pulls from every horror movie you can think imaginable, that at least is not like dealing with like Nightmare on Elm Street, Dreams, but even then it's still got a swing set in it. But it pulls from like Jurassic Park. It pulls from The Shining, obviously, from like the plot twist. And so there's a lot of things that are good about it. The reason why I liked it is that it's like, think of it's like Christmas Day, and you get those, or I guess, those, candies or whatever that you open, and you're looking for the best ones, and you want the raspberry filled one, you want the apple.
Oh, you're talking like a Whitman sampler?
Yeah.
Sure.
But you don't want the almond one, because get out of there.
Almond's good. You don't want the coconut.
You don't want the coconut. Leave the coconut.
Exactly.
So this film is essentially like I like to think of it as like a buffet of like the cream of the crop, the best versions or a regurgitation of the best horror, like kind of a horror safari, if you will. And it does that, and you get taken up by it because you point and look at it and go, oh, that's Jurassic Park, like the raptor scene. And you point at that, that's exactly that.
Right, to
and
be
all
clear,
these
you're
things.
not talking just the things that happen, but like shot sequences,
Right? Like the
like
motivation of why the shot is angled a certain way, how much they let loose. Is it all in her head? Like they do it very, artistically, but
right. And like Tarantino will do, they unabashedly copy a sequence from another movie.
Yeah.
And it's not to be a parody of it. It's to be like, look how classy I am. I'm quoting this great horror
and that's
movie.
what doesn't work for me with Tarantino anymore. Is here when I watched it again, I was like, but what is the purpose of it? It's just like I can just go back and watch Vertigo, which is the first one I did it. This just because this is like highlight reel. Sometimes I want to watch the game.
See, what's weird is that line must be different for everyone, and that line is like evolving right now because I didn't feel that way about this movie, but like I feel that way about Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm.
I have no interest whatsoever because it's not innovative enough. I like some things that are a sampler of my childhood. Like I liked 8 Millimeter. That's the snuff film one.
That's Nick Cage.
Super 8. I liked Super 8, and that was sort of a regurgitation of Spielberg, but so is Stranger Things, and for some reason it's just not new enough. There's not enough new material, and it reads as just filler to me. Like, it's really boring to me, but not High Tension. High Tension still gets me, and maybe it's just because of how brutal it really is. Because that's the other thing, if you haven't seen it, you're debating whether to see it. The kills are fucking brutal.
Yeah.
Like, think about how many throat slittings you've seen just in Game of Thrones alone, but I mean, if you're a horror fan,
this one takes the cake.
It's the best throat slit, best is in quotes, but like, it's the most disturbing throat slit sequence. So well executed. Like, think about this. It's so genius. She's hiding in one of those closets. This has been used to great effect in other movies, like E.T. and shit. But she's hiding in one of those closets where the door has slats. Or Burn After Reading when Brad Pitt gets shot. But so she sees a woman's throat get slit directly in front of her, and then the woman like slowly dies and falls down the slitted door so that at every step her gash is visible in one slit and her eyes are visible in the slit above. And she like stops like an elevator at every floor on the way down. And it's so clearly choreographed that it's clearly intentional. And I think that, like, I don't know why, but somehow the elegance of the execution makes it more disturbing to me. Whereas, like, and I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, but there's like an infamous movie called a Serbian film where a bunch of people got together and were like, what's the most upsetting thing we could ever show happen? And so you watch it, if you have a deep morbid curiosity like me, to see like, well, what did they come up with? And it's horrifying, but more in a way where you're like, I can't believe these people who made this are so morally empty inside. Yeah. But there's nothing good about it, and it's boring ultimately. Whereas this is just a throat slit, your standard horror throat slit, and it, like, I was holding my throat and going like, oh no.
And to the credit of the director, honestly, yeah, it's like what Hitchcock said about like when he chose Vertigo, he's like, I wanted the most vulnerable place because vulnerability is the key to like suspense and terror. And so he's like, it's either in the shower or on
Psycho,
the john.
Right?
Psycho, sorry.
Psycho,
yeah. Yeah, I said Vertigo earlier before I meant Psycho. And let me just roll that, like, tell you there's so many times in this movie where it's just like, oh, seen that scene and another scene, but they like kind of change it enough. I think that's the line we're talking about.
Yeah.
Marie goes out to smoke and there's swing. She's on a lonely swing set, and that's where the turn happens, which, as we know, is, if you remember Nightmare Before Elm Street, it's kind of it's the psychological twist of at this moment once, and then it's a shot of
empty crinky swing.
And that's when she has transposed from Marie the smoker to Marie the killer.
And you got to say Cornfield. Is that already on the list?
Yeah, Cornfield's
like,
up there.
God,
yeah.
How classic horror can you get? They chase them
exactly.
to a
They
cornfield.
live in a house that's just cornfield. You mentioned the throat slit next in the house when she. So at first she does in after the killer's there and decapitates the father, she is in her room and she's the only one who's seemingly aware that there's been a break-in, and she opens the the psycho shower. But then she goes, kind of in a post-Scream world, where I think in Scream there was that one line, no one runs upstairs, that's the worst thing to do.
But it's so much more elegant because she doesn't say anything.
She just opens it and realizes this is a bad idea.
People hide in the shower and they always get stabbed. I shouldn't hide in the shower. And you're like, that's so satisfying.
Where she goes next is she goes to the closet where the throat slit happens, and that's another horror trope. Because in the early,
also, ironically, of course, since you know the twist, she didn't have to do any of this. This is just her running around the house, imagining
shit. This is what she remembers.
She's hallucinating. Yeah.
She's hallucinating. About 50 minutes in, there's a hide and seek game that is basically the raptor scene from Jurassic Park in terms of how it's shot and how the tension's
gas station, right?
And where she's at the one end of the aisle and the raptor being the villain is at the kiosk desk, and there's this kind of back and forth kind of rotation that happens between them. There's shortly after that, there's a bathroom scene, which is actually taken from a Belgian film called Maniac. I want to say Belgian. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, where it's as the killer kicks down each of the stalls.
Yeah, that's
and you're
right.
waiting to see her because we've seen her in a stall. And of course she's not there because she is the killer. But that is scene shot for shot, just that horror trope, which we've seen in many films at this point, where a killer, even in thrillers and James Bond movies, this happens. I think there's a scene in Casino Royale where that happens.
The bathroom stall is such a gimme for there's 4 mystery
safety,
boxes. You're gonna open them one at a time and launch the surprise.
You think you're safe, but it's a very easy, just kick it down. At one point, she's driving away from the truck. This is a little later in the film, but it's basically shot for shot Spielberg's Duel, even all the way down to the driver's pickup, as they call it, but it's not really a pickup. It's a small semi truck, and the front looks like something you'd see in Robot Wars, and it mimics kind of like a tank or a semi.
His car's very weird. It's it's like a gas-proof little Jeep truck with armor plating.
What a murderer would drive.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. It's like a murder van. That's the best word for it.
Even Marie's car looks like a Plymouth variant, and in Duel it's a red car. In this one it's a yellow. They're both bright, sporty cars, flashy with color. The plastic covering in the greenhouse that she's choked
for the final fight.
Yeah, for the final fight. That's a horror trope, to cover someone in plastic.
Right, right, of course.
And
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, if you haven't seen it, or I realized what I think makes the twist work so well versus other things where you do find out, oh, we were the killer all along, or the person we were riding with in their head, they were the killer all along. They based it on a very simple pivot, which is Marie is in love with Alex. Alex is straight, Marie's a lesbian, and she obviously is in love with Alex. And love is perfectly vague. It works so perfectly because it makes equal sense that she would be flipping out, desperately chasing her and trying to contain her if she were in love with her and trying to save her, or if she's trying to kill her because she's insane. Mm-hmm. So everything, I just think they nailed it as far as all the things Marie does. You're in retrospect, yep, I could have read that scene either way. And when I watched it this time and tried to read all the scenes as threatening, it's awesome how creepy Marie is the whole time and you don't notice it. Before, the first time you watch it, you would never notice some of the planned payoffs. The first line of dialogue she ever has is accusing Alexis of being a slut and fucking every man they ever meet when they're out together. And you realize that she's slowly, in retrospect, she's already dangerously obsessed with her, but you would never notice it because so many decapitations are happening, except on the second viewing. And I just love when a twist bears up to a second viewing. Yeah. Now, the one thing I will say and have to ask is, the cops end up seeing the van. The van is real and exists. And in the end, when she snaps out, or we snap out of it, we, the audience, know Marie is the killer, and she reveals herself and is just carrying a chainsaw as herself. The van is there. So the van is real. where'd that van come from? How'd Marie get that van? She drove out to this remote place that she doesn't know where it is, and she didn't drive, and she was asleep for most of the drive. Where'd she get that murder van?
Well, either you believe that it's an unreliable narrator and the van is something else. And
like
it's
just a stolen car or something?
Yeah, but I like to believe that it's, obviously we're doing work for them, so it could just be a plot hole. But I like to think that it's just like a family van. Like they're farmers and they need farm equipment, and that's why they need to put livestock in there and shit like that.
But I say it basically as a compliment because I was looking as hard as I could
for holes.
Now that I know the twist, right? For shit that was physically impossible, and there's really not a lot. I wonder how she got the axe so fast when Jimmy was turning around to get the liquor out. But or I really desperately want to know what a third-party observer would have seen if they could have been a fly on the wall in the gas station. Like, did she run in screaming, "You got to help me, there's a murderer," then ask him for liquor, then wink at him, then axe him? What? Like, yeah.
It does fall apart a little bit.
Well, there's scenes where you wish you could have literally seen what was actually happening, but that's not the point of the movie, so it's okay.
We'll give it a pass for that. I want to go back to what you were saying about like the love interest and like how she cracks through that. I thought it was a nice little like kind of folding of content into form, in that what I was talking about earlier about how it's like in its roots, it's 70s, 80s slasher film. About 20 minutes into it, it gets the obligatory like sex scene out of the way, so the killing can commence. That's a trope of most horror movies, and that observation is.
You mean the masturbation?
Yeah, and that's exactly why it's interesting. Is like within 25 minutes, there's a self-realization. Since it's like a self-realization, self-actualization film. Marie is in her dream that we see in the first scene of the film. She's chasing herself as a foreshadow element, but the sex scene isn't a sex scene at all. It's a masturbation scene, which is perfect for when we learn the twist that she was
the whole thing's just her.
Yeah, but we needed that loss of innocence. Like, I think that's what that's why it's there in like Friday the 13th, or like,
and it's explicitly not innocent masturbation because she spied through the window to watch her friend showering.
Yeah,
and it's been established that her friend wouldn't be comfortable with that if she knew.
Right,
and she goes to her bed and masturbates. You know what she's thinking about.
Right.
And I just realized, and it hit me. The scene right before that is the very first time you meet the killer. And if you already weren't aware that this is gory as shit, you might want to tune out now. He's in the van with a severed head, and he's blowing himself with the severed head, which, if you assume the spirit has left the severed head, is also masturbation. I mean,
yeah, he's just using a body part.
Exactly. Necrophilia, but masturbation. So there are these weird clues. And also I think the fact that the killer is repeatedly a forensic genius is kind of a tip-off that he's not real, because he's like this utterly... Did I interrupt a larger arc? Okay, then let's dive into the villain, because I do want to talk a little bit just about him as a separate piece. Mm-hmm. I love horror, and yet I find it an intensely hit and miss genre. I have a high standard for film, so I'm always blown away when a horror film's actually good or actually scares me, even if the whole thing's not good. And the thing that can never get me is the relentless, slow-moving, giant, non-speaking monster. Jason is not scary to me. Mike Myers is not scary to me, etc. But fucking this dude is obviously... I think, in some ways, a nod to those kinds of monsters.
Yeah, he's the feral villain.
And he scares the shit out of me. And like the truck from Duel, he's the non-speaking, inanimate, just monster. And I'll tell you what does it. Mike Myers and Jason, what's scary about them is they relentlessly come at you because that's what they do, right?
They're inscrutable.
It's almost like a boulder rolling down a hill. But when it gets to you, you just get crushed to death.
Yeah.
And it doesn't care. This dude... Like, I love the unnecessary, gratuitous cruelty he shows.
Yeah.
It makes him so much scarier. So he does have no facial expression and just quietly walk up to the house and quietly slit your throat. But then he cuts your hand off with a rusty razor blade to take as a trophy while he, like, grunts sexually about it. Or, like, when she's screaming for her life, he pauses with his chainsaw and like quiets it down to go, and like mock her screaming.
Yeah.
And it's these little moments that punctuate the like, oh, I'm scared. And this guy is like the devil. Like, what's funny is I already know that because he's slitting throats left and right. But man, he's even mean for a serial killer. Like, he's just a dick.
He douses Alex through the, back, with alcohol, and then he lights a match to smoke a cigarette, which is functional for him. But then he goes one step further and just holds the burning match over her as she cowers in fear, and then just laughs about it. Like, I'm going to set you on fire, or maybe I won't. It's all good.
And then smokes a cigarette, right? And I found it really chilling. It reminded me of I just rewatched Blood Simple not too long ago, and do you remember the sheriff villain in that?
Yeah,
he had some of that vibe where like what was really scary about him wasn't that he shot you in the back, but after he shot you in the back and you died and were like collapsing, he would go like, ha ha, woo, and like wipe his brow and walk away, like he thought all this shit was funny.
Yeah, I think or at least. He is terrifying to me, and definitely more so than like the Mike Myers of the world, because his villainy is nuanced. Like, even if he's not an inscrutable, pain monger. He is that, but he's also on top of everything. More terrifying because he's elated by it. Like the fact that you feel fear, the fact that you feel pain excites him in a way.
Yes.
As opposed to like a curse that causes these other villains to just relentlessly kill. It doesn't affect them. They just have to. And that is different it's a different form of psychosis it's the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. I mean, they're all psychopaths, but like with a sociopath, it's a little more like, well, I just don't care.
Or I require power over this situation. I'm going to remove you.
That's terrifying. But a psychopath who like relishes in like, I want to see your blood.
I love your blood. Yeah. Give me your blood. You're like, oh my God, dude.
All right, you're a little more scared.
Yeah. I realize it's like a horror Life of Pi, basically.
Yeah.
Hey, did you notice right after the turn on the swing, when in retrospect you realize this was when she made the decision or had her psychotic break, whatever. First of all, I could go endlessly, but there's a lot of creepy shit in retrospect. Like, the last thing she says to Alexis before Alexis will see her again as a nuts person is, I'm glad I finally met your family. The unspoken thing being like, because now they can all die and I can begin my plan.
Yeah.
But did you notice when she goes crazy, she looks at a doll and the doll's face is broken? And yes, that's hackneyed. It's a little like the dude in Adaptation who's like, I'm writing about split personality. I'm going to have a theme of broken mirrors. It's a classic trope that's maybe been beaten to death. And I don't know if I get anything out of this, but I'll just say, when Alexis does finally fight back, the only wound she inflicts till she does the crowbar through the chest to Marie is she slashes her down the face, and she gives her a scar identical to the scar the doll has. I don't know what that means or if it's just stupid, but it's there.
Yeah.
It's like the teddy bear in Breaking Bad that's in the pool for the whole, second or third season.
Right.
The burned face is the exact same pattern as Gus's burned face. I don't actually know what that means. I think sometimes they're just laying pipe and paying it off because it's fun to do,
Yeah, and I want to give credit to this film also for how the topic that it chooses, which uses like a bag of tricks that aren't that big. The slasher films, like jump scares are like bread and butter to, turn around. And there's so many classic tropes that we've seen. Well, some of the favorite ones is the music or like a long string holds and then it gets quiet and then it's absolute silence. And then at the right time, a phone rings. That's one. There's another one where it's like someone's brushing their teeth at, the mirror.
They even did the bend down to the mirror and you bend up and someone's behind you.
And they quickly close it and it, obviously there's someone behind them. There's about 5 of them in this, which is low end. And I'd say like 3 of them are like red herrings. They're all like, no, it's not a real thing, which, doesn't give it that much credit. But I'm amazed if you compare it to something like this, like, I don't know, like I Know What You Did Last Summer or some of these, resurgent 2000 horror films and Wes Craven, craziness. Like it's just like every fucking horror scene. And there's only like 2 legitimate ones. One is to me the swinging of the axe at the cashier when he's getting alcohol.
That
comes very suddenly.
That's got to be a Shining thing, right? Halloran.
Yeah.
Gets an axe in the exact same way in the exact same spot on his chest. Yeah,
and talk about visceral. One of my favorite things about, like, he steps on the guy's chest to let the axe go deeper.
Yeah, no, he steps on the guy's back.
Yeah.
To push the axe further into his chest. And that's what I mean about the cruelty is this dude doesn't, this is not a monster who slits your throat and then you're dead and you're out of the movie. You will stay alive for like 60 seconds for him to brutalize your body.
Yeah.
That's going to be your last experience.
And
he likes fucking you up.
It goes along with the same kind of horror that is like one of the best scenes in Saving Private Ryan is when they have to slowly allow the knife to go in because he's like, he doesn't want to do it, but he knows that this is life or death. That is completely different scene, but it's like the same kind of horror of like this slow death.
There's just something about edged weapons. If you listen to Dan Carlin talk about history, he's like, that's what everything, that's what changed everything is 10,000 years ago. If you were going to kill someone, you had to kill them with an edged weapon you held in your hand. It's very different than a bomb or a gun.
Yeah.
There's just something about it. Did you notice the Die Hard? I'm pretty confident it's a Die Hard reference.
With the fact that she doesn't have shoes?
They're not just that she doesn't have shoes. Feet shots are a recurring shot in the thing to the point where I made a note. There's got to be a reason why all these feet. Is it a Tarantino reference? Just figure it out.
I think that guy just likes feet.
Well, I think it's a Die Hard reference because if you're conscious of feet, then you're thinking about Alexis's feet, and the final challenge she faces is that she has a huge, gnarly chunk of glass all the way through her foot while she's trying to run away from Marie.
Yeah, that's
true. And I feel like that's the Die Hard walking on glass scene, maybe. But when someone's referencing 100 things they love, it's easy to be like, there's some accidental ones in there too.
All right.
But I picked that one out and you didn't list it, so I was like, maybe.
No, I think there's something there, and just the idea that let's get back to why Die Hard made that choice, is that to make it, there's an ounce of vulnerability, the fact that you're a fish out of water, you weren't expecting this to happen.
I think stepping on glass or being barefoot and having it hurt is so universally known to suck.
Marie is barefoot as well, and she's running around in the woods. She's like, her feet are also banged up, as we see several times. Not only that, I would go one further and say she's like Terminator-esque because she gets stabbed like 9 times. Like she gets cut, she gets like her face impaled at one point. Like she gets she gets stabbed by Alex, like in the stomach, she's still able to cut apart a car with a chainsaw.
But I do wonder, I gave it a pass on that just because she is in a full psychotic break where she doesn't even think she's that person. Just because, there's the dude on Angel Dust who can wrestle 6 cops and you think it's physically impossible, but no, it's because they're so far gone. Their body is not even feeling pain and has unleashed 100% of their adrenaline.
Right.
Like after this episode, they're going to be dead of exhaustion, but this they can do. Maybe I give it a pass. But I did write at the end, my note is, also I said, is that a Muse song? Yeah,
at the end? It's a Muse song. They play it twice.
They play it twice, yeah. I wrote, Alex lives, but why? And I don't mean like she deserved to die. I mean, she saw her beloved little brother get shot in the back. She saw her dad get decapitated by a piece of furniture and her mom get her throat slit. And I'm like, man, she's just going to have a rough time. And then I wrote, Marie lives, but how?
Yeah,
they both live.
Yeah. What I love,
Marie lives. Marie gets a crowbar through her heart. Mm-hmm. And then they cut to her in the hospital. Although I will admit that I think the final scene is also awesome. Don't you think that's a great last shot for this movie?
Yeah, her hands up like a little baby bird.
But it's perfect because she's in the insane asylum with cuffs on, and Marie is behind the one-way mirror, and the only line in the scene is she says to the doctor, and you're sure she can't see us, right? And Marie instantly looks at her super creepy and reaches her hands out to her as far as they can go.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Cut to credits for a sequel, yeah. Yeah, dude. Higher tension. Or high tune-tion. The number 2.
Yeah, I typically when I rewatch a film, especially if not if I've rewatched a film in the last 2 years, because it's almost impossible. But there seems to be, for me at least, an amount of time that I can suspend disbelief, and even though I knew in my heart there was a twist, and I knew what the twist was, when I rewatched it, I tried to watch it best as I could with that veil across my eyes. And one of the things that I thought was super effective was the fact that you really think because you believe Marie. If you were to watch the film and you're be like, Marie's trying to help you, Alex, you got to get out of this situation, especially in the car. Well,
because
they're trying to hide, and Alex is just making all the noises. She's just crying, to the point of, if you're on Marie's side, which you should be at this point in the film, you're like, Alex, just fucking, what is your problem? I know it's terrible what's happening in your family.
And that's what Marie's saying is you got to stop making noise or he's going to find us.
He's going to find us. He doesn't know where we are right now, and now he does. So you're very kind of angry at Alex, but then as the twist is revealed, you realize it's because she's looking at the face of the killer and she just doesn't want the killer to kill her. So it's just a completely different twist. It's it's sometimes you get those twists that are oh, that's cute, and psychologically that's neat. And now I think back at the scenes, and some of the scenes are different, the Sixth Sense. That was an effective twist, but the realization that Bruce Willis doesn't talk to anyone in that film other than Haley Joel Osment is a lot different than in this film, where the twist actually palpably actually changes how those scenes play.
You can imagine
in a fundamental way.
You can imagine a second movie in your head and be pretty sure how it would go, and it's equally viscerally terrifying. And it's cool that you almost got 2 brain movies for the price of 1 eyeball movie.
Right.
And I agree, because The Sixth Sense, okay, I guess it is an effective twist, because to me a twist has 2 goals, and Sixth Sense and Shyamalan always is effective in one and not the other. One is, in the moment, it feels like a monumental surprise that is satisfying enough for you to go, what? Whoa, that's crazy.
Whoa.
Then the second part is, if you think about it for 10 minutes, or God forbid, watch the movie a second time, the movie should feel richer. And not only does Sixth Sense not feel richer the second time, but it's impossible, knowing the twist, to not start going, wait, then this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
How did that happen? So it falls apart. And I just think this movie doesn't. Just the opposite. It rewards you. She says, I'm going to take care of you, Alex, in a loving way. But in retrospect, you know that she was saying that I'm going to take care of you, Alex. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's great.
Sixth Sense just ties up just makes sure that the ends of the rope are just not tied up, but just not frayed.
Yes.
Versus this film, which creates new knots that while you go and rewatch it, you're like, oh, new knot. It's got the scenes have a lot more density than you thought.
And I love that she's a lesbian. I don't want to say man hater, because it sounds like I'm being homophobic, but she thinks all men are pigs. She really does. And she says it, and wants to keep Alexis away from all the men, and all they want is one thing. And the monster that she envisions is basically a
grotesque,
the worst version of a dude who just fucks anything, including dead body parts. He's a pig. But a murder pig.
Yeah, he looks like a pig.
Yeah.
I also thought that it was interesting that they chose to dress him up in a it feels like a French 1940s thriller, or a bank heist thing. He's like a handyman.
Yeah, he's in a gray overall.
And I thought it was interesting at the beginning of the film, she's talking about how much she hates the country to Alex. Marie says she's like, how can anyone live out here? It smells like shit. There's nothing to do here. I want to party. She's like, we're here to study and stuff like that. But she already is separating herself from her environment. So from the get-go, Marie is basically positioning herself as a kind of city elite. And she's elitist in her way. So when we get this kind of blue collar kind of handyman as the antithesis to her psychosis, we get this thing where it's it now becomes not just a psychosis film where we're dealing with her break of her own ability to deal with her own identity. It also becomes kind of a class thing. It's not
That's not very developed.
It's not very developed, but I think there's something there because like she gets the flashy car, like she like in a way like the city and like her sexual orientation is like it's a lot more free of an area, you know, the urban environment versus like a rural kind of traditionalism, farmers.
Well,
like,
and of course it makes it so that people can't come help you no matter how loud you scream, which is necessary for this kind of movie.
And it's not super developed. It's not like they have like plan and payoff of it, but I just thought it was a nice touch to just kind of remark to that at that point is that the thing that she's scared of or she despises, as you said, like the quote unquote man hating or the grotesque male, she even hates the culture in which that thrives.
Right. I was going to ask, what do you think about, so she, first of all, she kills the monster in a badass way with a bat made from an old fence post with a barbed wire wrapped around it.
It's like and or Harley Quinn.
The effect is awesome. Like when he gets wanged in the head with the barbed wire and you instantly see like 24 little puncture wounds start bleeding. It's very effective. But here's my point. As now that we know everything, why did she hallucinate an epic final confrontation where he like outwitted her with a belt and a flashlight and he almost killed her, but she killed him? From the point of view of her psychosis, do you think that meant anything? Because like in normal symbolism, follow me here, that would mean that she's good now. You know what I mean? This isn't how real life works. But in a movie, if we go inside your mind and you kill like a shadow version of yourself in your brain, you usually wake up and go, I'm fine now. But she instantly became unabashedly evil. She's like, now it's me as myself, and I admit I am going to fucking kill you with a saw. Although I guess not. Maybe it was...
I don't think it is. I think I think that's the filmmaker showing this is what the real events were versus, and it has been the whole time. We're just letting you in now. I think in that moment, Marie still thinks she's trying to save Alex, and she is this third party observer.
So you don't think her psychosis ever broke? We just filmically broke and start to see the real events.
I don't know if that's what the
like in Looney Tunes when you're dreaming and then it cuts to reality.
Yeah.
Or you're hallucinating.
I don't know if that's what the director intended or the writer intended, but it seems like that is the clear-cut version of it.
I do think there's a clue to that because a choice I loved. The second that you know irrefutably, like when the twist is deployed, it cuts to a cop watching security footage and he's like, oh, it's her. Right. And so now you, the audience, if you didn't already guess, now you know. It instantly cuts to her coming up to Marie saying things she's been saying throughout, like, it's okay, we're going to be okay, we just got to keep calm. But now the actress is clearly making a choice to be crazy seeming, which I just love. Like her performance changes. Before she was like in the van, she was like, you got to stay calm. We got to, and now she's like, you got to stay calm. It's all going to be okay. Like as soon as you know she's crazy, she leans into it and she is really crazy. Yeah. But yeah, I guess I just wondered in her hallucinatory state, maybe she thought by killing him, now I'm going to come out. Maybe she expected to come out of the woods and have Alex be really grateful and they live happily ever after, right? Because like when she kisses her and she is disgusted by being kissed by her, that's when she's like, well, now I'm just going to chop you in half with an axe.
Yeah.
Which also I find, I don't know. I know she's just crazy, but the whole time she's killing everyone and she just keeps Alex alive because that's her only reason for existing and her sole obsession. I don't think she would just like try to kiss her once and then she's like, I don't want to be with you. And she's like, then I'll chop your fucking head off.
I don't think it, well, I don't know. I think it gets back to this unreliable narrator, right? I mean, in the same way of like, why think of the whole flashlight gag as like a way to hoodwink yourself? Well, also look at when she's on the phone with the actual cops before the cops like arrive. She gets angry at the cops and is just like, I can't find the name of the, gas station, which is not how a reasonable person thinks.
No, she hangs up on the cops in a situation where no one would ever do that.
So I think they're like, even though I think she's on autopilot, I think there's this kind of like back of the mind, like that you can't do these things because they'll find you. So there is this maybe like subconscious awareness of that things aren't like she's both at the same time, even if she's one at one time. She's Marie and she's the driver. at other times she knows that she needs to do these certain things so that she isn't caught. Because otherwise, how do you explain that? Like in both
and yet
cases.
why does she call 911 at all? So she is far enough gone to have called 911, but then she's she's aware enough that she's the murderer that she hangs up on them.
Right. So when we ask her,
interesting mental space.
Exactly, it's unreliable. But when we ask the question of when they're in the forest and like Alex is almost getting away.
What literally happened?
Like what literally happened? Why does she have that switch of like, you don't want to kiss me? Well, I guess I'm going to murder you. I think that the real events of that is like, she's this like acting, as film has always taught us, like schizophrenic kind of like, well, the fact that she gets angered is now a trigger for her to be this person, but she's still both when it comes down to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's so easy to make it cheesy when you're shooting that sequence where it alternates between both identities, you know what I mean? In the final scene, it's like, it's Marie, it's the driver, it's Marie, it's the driver. And I think they did even that well. It's executed well. They picked the right times to switch who it was in shot. And then, dude, the last kill is my favorite kill. If you guys like horror, you got to at least fast forward and see her take apart this car with a giant, like, two-handed circular saw, because it's awesome. Because, like, the blade gets stuck in the windshield and it barely reaches the guy's chest.
So blood is flying everywhere, but he's not dead.
It's way worse than if it reached his, right. It barely reaches his chest, so he just has, like, bits of flesh and sternum stripping away as he's like fumbling with his seatbelt trying to move his chair back. Yeah. It's pretty gruesome and awesome.
Also, right before that, the reason she catches up, other horror fans will notice that the car doesn't start, which is just yet another trope of like, because it crashed.
That's the most classic,
but it's just like classic. Yeah. And then doesn't he, the driver, or Maria, we should say, kills the driver of the new driver of the car,
right?
She's taking apart. Doesn't she kick in the windshield like it's another one of those put my feet on it and just push until it goes through him?
Which is it's the killer 3 or 4 times just uses their foot to do something horrible, which maybe that's why all the shots of feet, but it's a very interesting technique. That's how, and it is disturbing.
The first kill is that too.
I know, and it's rough.
Yeah. Well, I guess the decapitation happens with the piano, right. But she cuts away a part of one of the posts of the stairs.
Of the banister on the stairs.
And there's just like a 4-inch kind of like wooden thing, and she just pushes down on his neck so that he's stuck, like I did when I was a kid, get my head stuck in the banister. But this time it doesn't work out. It goes through your throat.
Your dad doesn't put Crisco on your neck and pull you out. You get decapitated with a bureau.
What?
Dad rubbed Crisco on my ears and I popped right out.
Oh, okay.
Of the banister.
I thought this was like an annual thing. No,
just one time. That was just the one time.
Boy, time to Crisco your neck.
I mean, get your head stuck in a banister once, shame on you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's all I got for that. I'm glad we did at least one like really gnarly horror thing. I know it's not everyone's jam, but I'm sure we'll dip into horror now and then.
Yeah, there's one thing I want to add.
Yeah, I want to know more. Cool. Like, do you know what else this guy's done? If anything, we should. You talk, and I'm going to look that up while you say that.
Something that I thought was there's a bit of controversy over this, not only with the goriness and the fact that they were going to, call it rated X at the time, or whatever it is.
NC-17 or whatever.
NC-17, and they had to cut a bunch of stuff just to make it an R. So definitely, if you're going to watch this film, if you've watched this film, but if you haven't watched the unrated, undubbed version, that's the best version. You want to watch it in French, and because it makes a lot more sense, and then also it has a lot more shots of grotesqueness, but that unrated version, before it got, it was argued that it was plagiarized from a novel called Intensity, which it's like almost beat for beat the same thing, by Dean Koontz. The director acknowledged that he had read the novel and was aware of the similarities. On his website, Koontz stated that he was aware of the plagiarism, but would not sue because he didn't want any association with the film. He didn't want to give it any more. He hated the film so much he did not want to give it any more.
What's the name of the book that it's like?
Intensity.
Oh, I've heard of that, but I never read that one. Yeah,
But apparently it's very similar. Probably same. I haven't read
probably
it.
the same twist, or
Probably
what would they
same
be
twist.
arguing about?
Yeah.
He also directed. Oh, so we need to talk about Maniac. You said it as if you hadn't seen it. Is that correct?
I haven't seen Maniac now.
Both versions of Maniac are fucking awesome, dude. The original version, and there's a recent remake, which our guy, the director and writer of High Tension, who I'm going to mispronounce, Alexandre Aja, or Aya, or Aja, AJA, produced the American version, which has Elijah Wood as the Maniac. And Maniac is this guy who skins beautiful women and puts their skin on mannequins and lives in a creepy warehouse where he carries on a relationship with his mannequins. But what's amazing about the American remake in particular is Elijah Wood's great at being creepy and scary and like in a weird, uncomfortable, sad way. And B, the whole movie is a single POV oneer. Like from Elijah Wood's point of view. It's Peep Show. You only ever see Elijah Wood in mirrors and reflections. Cool. And when you are scalping women, it's pretty hard to watch because you are the killer. Like it's all POV.
I see he also directed Horns.
He also directed Horns
Daniel
with
Radcliffe.
Yep. And then the only other notable one, at least to me, was Hills Have Eyes, the most recent remake, which I remember now I watched because it was the High Tension dude, and it is decent, but not as good as High Tension.
Well, there it is.
There it is. The complete career of a fellow human boiled down to an hour. You can stop, Alexandre Aja. You're done now.
You truly were the best of us.
Yep.
So that, I think, concludes High Tension. Everybody, thanks for listening. You have been listening to Frame Rate from Small Beans, which is Michael and I. And we'll have Michael insert some social media stuff here, I guess.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.